What's up, guys? Welcome back. So today I want to set up working with the Yelp API. The Yelp API is how we're going to get restaurants that are local. Now, to actually fetch stuff from the Yelp API, I want to create a async task that I do this in. So let's create one right down here. So we're going to create this a class. I'm going to call this fetch pictures. And it's going to extend async task. Now async task has three things. The first one, I believe, is what you pass in to the on when you initialize the async task. So for us, it's going to be a string, and then the middle is how we're going to post updates, which doesn't really matter. Well, actually, it does. For now, we'll leave it as string. So for now, we're going to have string for each parameter, and I'll explain what each one of these does later. This one we'll always ignore, but these two we will be using. So okay, go ahead and implement the methods. Do in background. So now right here, if you're not familiar with how async task works, is we can call this class create something. So I could be like new fetch pictures, and I can do call execute, and what will happen is it'll pass it'll go right here as a parameter. They'll call this do in background, and we can pass in parameters here. So for example, I can put a string like that, and it'll pass in as a parameter right here, and that is, if we change this to like an integer, then we can pass an integer parameter and all that sort of thing. So for now, we're not going to pass any parameters. All we're going to do is execute our async task. So that's going to be call our do in background, and this is going to happen asynchronously. So what that means is other code can be run while this is happening. This is happening in like a background thread behind the scenes. So this is a good way to download and make an API call. So to use the Yelp API, you need to make sure and go to the Yelp API page and create a consumer key, a secret token, all that stuff. You're going to need these to access it. So make sure you go and do that. And then once you have these, we're just going to add these to our strings file right here to use. So if we go into, change this to Android, values strings right here. So I'm just going to create 5 new strings. So the first one's going to be consumer key, consumer secret, consumer key, consumer secret, and then I got token, token secret, and then we're just going to replace that with our 2 other values. Grab that and get our last one. Okay, now we have our keys. Go back here, and to actually access the Yelp API, we're going to use a Yelp library that actually Yelp creates. This is really nice and handy. So if I'll link this in the description below, the link to this page. And this has all the information of how to use the Yelp API, which is what we want to do. So we're going to be using, first we have to include this in our project, and we're using Gradle. So we can just copy this compile line right here and add it as a dependency. So go to our app, just add it right underneath Picasso, and then we just need to rebuild Gradle. So now we can use the Yelp API. If we scroll down, it shows us how to use the Yelp API. We just need to make a hash map with some parameters. and then we can call the Yelp API just like that. If we scroll down a little bit more, we can see we can pass in coordinates to it. That's exactly what we want to do. Creating a basically the search radius based on what we're going to get the location from their phone, and then pass in the coordinates and the parameters and make a call that way. So we're just going to copy this code. For now, we're just going to hard code in the coordinates like that. But in later videos, we're going to actually get the latitude and longitude using the phone. Okay. And Yelp API is something we need to create. If we shows us right here. And we'll, since these you only have to do once, we'll create these at the top up here. Just do it right below our fetch. And let's make these global. So M and M. And then we're going to create those up here. So Yelp API factory, API factory, and then Yelp API is going to be Yelp API. Then right over here, let's get string r dot string dot consumer key, and let's just space these out. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing 4 times. Now we get consumer secret. Now we'll get our token. And now we'll get our token secret. Okay, so that creates that. And then we'll just create our API. Okay, so that initializes things, and then we can use it in our async call down here. So Yelp API, and we also need to create a map called params. Just copy that. Let's create one up here, same way. Call it params. So hash map. Nope, it's just map. Map string params. And then let's see what it doesn't like. I did map string new hash map. Oh, I just need to import the class. Okay, now it's working nicely there. And we're just going to pass in params here. And then what parameters do we want to pass? So right now we don't care about the limit or the language. I think this is the only one we care about, is making sure we're looking up food. Just paste that in. Alright, next we can do call to execute, and looks like we just need to put this into try catch. I'm just going to check if it's null, so set to null, response, and then we're going to check if it is null. It's not null. We can then proceed to get data. Okay, so what's happening here is we initialize basically our API here. We have our parameters that we're passing in. We're passing in food. And then down here, we're actually making the call. So we're also building the location. For now, we have it here, but that's another thing we're going to move up here later. We're hard coding the latitude and longitude that we're going to pass into Yelp to get the location. And then Yelp, we're going to call Yelp. So we're actually going to search it right here. We're creating the call, and then we're actually executing it. and we're looking for a response. So this is, if we just look at the response object real quick, it has a body, and then that has businesses and businesses. We get the first one, and then, you know, from here you can actually, this is what we want. We want to show all these businesses in our app. So if this call works, then we can just continue building out our app using this. So let's make sure this is working. So I'm just going to log it. Businesses. And then I'm just going to get response.body.businesses. So we're just going to print the array. Let's do toString. And we're just going to run that and see it in our Android monitor. I have my emulator up, and we're just going to check down here in our Android monitor whether we're making the API call okay. So we'll let that finish building. Oh, and it looks like we have a little bit of a problem. So yes, so this is a problem I actually ran into building this project before. For some reason, it doesn't like this compiling of this library or whatever. It says duplicate files copied in APK meta-inf license, and I have no idea what that was. So I just went over here to Google duplicate APK meta, and I just went over Stackoverflow, and they had this nice little thing where you exclude some packages. So I'll link this in the description as well. You just add this right above here, I believe, above build types. Yep. Basically what's happening, I think, is one of these libraries has one of these files, and then another one also has one of these files. So for example, Picasso and Yelp both have a license. We'll go ahead and sync this. Picasso and Yelp both have a license, and so when it's compiling together, they're getting duplicate files or something. And so all this is doing is excluding that and getting rid of that build problem. So now it should build okay, and then let us run our application. Okay, now let's run it and make sure it builds okay. And if it builds successfully, we'll see that our async task is being run, since we added this right here in our main activity. In our onCreate, we added it. So when it's built, we're just going to do this async task in the background and hopefully call Yelp and get some businesses. So let's see if we actually do. And let's just check on our, okay, it looks like it's just booting up still. Let's give it a second. While that is doing that, I can talk about how async task works a little bit more. So the two parameters you see here is later on what we're going to want to do. Oh, and you can see we got some build errors, but you can ignore those. What we're going to want to do later is in our async task, if you tried to update what's called the main thread, for example, the UI, which is like what the app looks like. Let's say in the async task that I wanted to change this picture, you get an error because you're in a different thread. So what you have to do is there's this function called onProgressUpdate. And what this does is we can call a function in our do in background that will call this, and this is run on the main thread, which allows us to touch the UI. So that might not make sense, but basically every time we want to change this image or whatever, and we want to do it in our async task, we have to do it in onProgressUpdate. So you'll see this later, and this string right here tells you the parameter here. So we're going to be editing that shortly. But it looks like our Android monitor finished. It looks like it loaded up nicely. And if we look at our log right here, check this out, guys. We can see some businesses. Awesome. So our Yelp call worked. That's perfect. So in our next video, I want to set up, adding this location, getting this from the user, so we're not having it hard coded. Also, I now have all these businesses. I want to get some pictures showing up. I want to show the businesses pictures right here. I want to show the images. So we'll be setting that in the upcoming videos and make this look a lot nicer and make this dynamic. So that's what we'll be doing in the next video. I'll see you guys then.